Today's lesson is going to be on the musical staff and the parts of the musical staff. So let's learn about those. First of all, there's 5 lines and 4 spaces. We're going to learn about something called the treble clef, the bass clef, and then we're going to learn about something called the bracket and the brace, and you'll see why. And then we're going to learn about something known as the musical alphabet. So let's learn first about that treble staff. We call these music staffs or staves. Those two terms are used interchangeably. Basically, you just got to remember that it's made up of lines and spaces. 5 lines and 4 spaces to be exact. Just take a look. 5 lines and 4 spaces. And then we have to have some kind of symbol to tell us what range of pitches or notes that we're going to be working with. And so these symbols that we have are called clef symbols or clef signs. And the first one we're going to learn about is called the treble clef. And that's what it looks like. Now you're probably going to want to learn how to make one of these on your own, so I would practice writing them, although it's not really essential for this course. So now let's take a look with the musical alphabet. What is it? Well, it's just like our regular alphabet with a couple of exceptions. Obviously, it starts with A, goes through all the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and then G, but then something happens. It does not go on to H or I or any other. In fact, what happens is it repeats itself. So it repeats itself again and again and again. It's always like this, A through G, and then it starts over. In fact, there's this old adage that says that if you know your ABCs up to G and you can count to 4, you can read music. Of course, that's not all there is to it, but that is essentially the truth. Now, let's look at how these letter names go with the lines and the spaces of a treble staff. In other words, each space, each line has a letter name associated with it. Now let's start with the spaces. Remember, we got 4 of them. Well, each of these spaces has a letter name associated with it. Let's start with the bottom, which is F. Next space up, A. Next space up is C. And the next space up after that is E. Well, okay, that's pretty easy because it spells the word face. So if you can remember that the treble clef spaces spell the word face, it's going to be easy for you to memorize them. And I should mention that is something you're going to want to do right away, is memorize the lines and the spaces to the treble and bass clefs. Now, if the spaces have letter names associated with them, so do the lines. The lines, starting with the bottom going up, are E, G, B, D, and F. Now, obviously that does not spell a word, but we do have some acronyms that you can use. The one that is probably the most well-known and popular is Every Good Boy Does Fine. Notice how the first letter is associated with, in every word, is associated with the letter names of the lines in the treble clef. Okay, so let's just take a regular music staff and take a look at it. Okay, there it is. 5 lines, 4 spaces, treble clef. And let's put those lines in there. Okay, so first bottom line, E, next line up is G, next line up is B, next line up is D, next line up is F. Now let's add the spaces to that. We have F, A, C, E. Now let's notice a little bit of an interesting phenomenon here. When we start with the bottom line, E, we go up to the next space, F, the next line, G, you should begin to notice, hey, these are alphabetical, A, B, C, D, E, and F. So there you go, lines and spaces. all of these things are associated with the alphabetical order, and of course the musical alphabet, which starts on A and ends on G, and then it repeats itself. So when we look at the spaces, we know that the spaces spell the word face. Well, then it's easy for us to tell, for example, what would the line be before the first space, before the space in F. So if the first space is F, for example, what would the bottom line be? Well, what comes before F in the alphabet? E. Makes sense. What would be the next line after F if it's, goes alphabetical, and it does? G. So that makes really quite a bit of sense. Okay, so when we look at the treble staff, we also need to look at the bass staff, and that too has 5 lines and 4 spaces, but it has a new symbol, different symbol than the treble clef, and you're going to want to know how this works or what it looks like so that you can identify it. But this is the bass clef, and just like the treble clef, the bass clef has letter names associated with the lines and spaces. The spaces in the bass clef are A, C, E, and G, and of course they don't spell a word unless you want to pronounce it ASGA, which some people do. Some people look at it that way. But the lines are G, B, D, F, and A. Now there are some acronyms that you can use to help you remember these. For the spaces, easiest one and the most popular is probably this one: all cows eat grass. And then for the lines, the most popular has been, over the years anyway, good boys do fine always. Now I also have another one: good burritos don't fall apart. That's actually my favorite. So there you have it, the lines and the spaces to the treble clef and the lines and the spaces to the bass clef.